Hey, hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jesse, and it's that time of year to do the mid-year book freakout tag. I can't believe it's already time, but here we are. We're in the middle of the year. I'm not necessarily freaking out about like books and reading, to be honest. I'm more so freaking out about the fact that like time is passing so fast. I feel like I feel this way every year when it comes time to do this tag, because I'm like, I swear it was just January yesterday. Here's to time flying by, my friends. I've read a total of 47 of 80 books so far this year, so I'm feeling pretty good about my reading goals. That's currently putting me 10 books ahead of schedule, so like, your boy's kind of killing it over here, okay? I am killing it. I'm a book champ. Watch out, world, because I am rotting in bed reading my books. And I wouldn't have it any other way. We're going to talk about our best books of the year, our worst books of the year so far, our best recommendations, best book covers, etc., etc. Without further ado, let's get started. First up, what's the best book you've read so far this year? I did do a video recently where I talked about my best books of 2024 so far, so I'll link that down below in the description if you want to go and check that out. But the best book that I've read so far this year is honestly one that is going to be hard to compete with because of how much I loved it. Like, it is in the top slot, and I feel like all these other books are coming into my life and trying to compete with it, but none of them compare. Like, there is yet to be a book that has even come close to reaching its level of greatness. And I do feel like I've been on a bit of a book tour singing this book's praises, but like, I just can't help it. I've joined the A River Enchanted cult and I can't seem to escape it, okay? I'm in deep. I am in deep. It's got its claws on me, and I just really truthfully don't see any other book coming into my life this year and messing with this. Though I have heard great things about the sequel. I've heard that the sequel is even better than the first book, which I could honestly see, but I've just been wary to pick up the sequel because I have just been let down time and time again by sequels, and also I've just been let down by a lot of duologies in the past. Like, the first book will be great, and then the second book will just be like unnecessary. So I don't know, but I've heard so many great things about the sequel, so I am excited to get to that one. But in this book, we are following this island where these girls are going missing. It's believed that these spirits of the island are behind the girls going missing. We have Adara, who is the heiress of the East, and Jack, who is a bard. They come together to lure out the spirits. It has a luscious, immersive writing style. I fully like sunk into this book as I was reading it. Like, this book became my reality. Like, the real world disappeared around me, and I found myself fully tucked into this book. It was a wild experience, but I just feel like that just goes to show like how strong the writing style is, how I was able to just kind of fully sink into this book. I love the character work, I love the mystery. There's just so much that this book does so well, and I highly, highly, highly recommend it. I feel like honestly this is my new Miss Peregrines. Like, the amount that I have talked about Miss Peregrines in the past could make some of you sick, probably. That's what I'm about to turn into in talking about this book. So prepare yourselves, here I come. I'm gonna be a monster and never shut up about this book. Next, what's the most disappointing book you've read so far this year? For this one, I'm going with a recent read, and that is the Kamogawa Food Detectives. But hear me out. This was a situation where it was like, it's me, not you. Like, truthfully, you didn't do anything wrong. I just had certain expectations going into this book, and I had a hard time shelving my expectations and kind of shifting my perspective as to what this book was delivering. I really had a hard time like meeting this book where it was at, and I was trying so hard to just like connect to it. In this book, we have these people coming to these food detectives to recreate these meals that mean something to them. So we're following these food detectives as they're trying to perfect these recipes, and then we're also kind of seeing why these meals are so important to these people that are coming to them. It sounds like something that I would like, honestly, and it did like bring on the cozy vibes, but like, I just didn't find the process of like tracking down the recipes to be that interesting of a story to follow. I also just like had a hard time connecting with the emotions of the characters. Like, I just never felt anything. I think that part comes in with me like just not finding any investment in the stories that they were sharing. Had I been more invested, of course I would have been more attached and had a stronger feeling surrounding this book, but I more so just left it feeling underwhelmed, honestly. And again, I went into this book with certain expectations. When I first read the description, for some reason, when I read the description, I went into it with the idea that people were going to come to these detectives and have them work on a case, and they would be able to solve the case through food. I don't know, it sounded interesting when I read the description, and that's what I was thinking this book was, but obviously that's not at all what this book is, and that's okay. And again, I think had I gone into this book without those expectations, that I would have enjoyed it a lot more, but I also still had some problems with it. I just did not find myself invested, and I also just didn't find the process of like tracking down the recipes to be that interesting. So I hate talking about books that disappointed me, but like, It disappointed me, I'm just being honest. What's the best book recommendation you've received this year? If I really wanted to be annoying, I would bring up A River Enchanted again because this was a recommendation, but I'm not going to be annoying. Even though technically I am being annoying because I am mentioning A River Enchanted again. So I think for this one, I'm going to do a non-recommendation recommendation. I did this video where I read booktubers DNF'd books, and one of the booktubers that I picked for that video was Emily Fox. She DNF'd Wayward, which I completely understand why she DNF'd Wayward. I don't think that this book is going to be for everybody, and truthfully, when I first started reading it, I had a really hard time with it, but like the deeper I got in and the more that I saw these threads of these stories coming together, I really found myself invested in it, and I really enjoyed the process of reading it. In this book, we are following 3 different perspectives through 3 different time periods. We're following Kate in 2019, who is fleeing an abusive relationship. 1619, we've got Alpha, who is awaiting a murder trial. And 1942, we've got Violet, who is trying to uncover the secret as to what happened to her mother. By the end of the story, these storylines end up kind of weaving together and coming together, which is one of my weaknesses when it comes to books. I love when a book has several different storylines and they end up kind of weaving together. It isn't like a fun, light, bubbly read by any means, that's for sure. Like, I truthfully went into this book thinking that it was going to be like full-on witchy vibes, but really it's not about that at all. Truthfully, it's about like the treatment of women and how we fail women time and time again. The subject matter is hard to swallow at times, but I think it is an important thing to process and think about and kind of reflect on why a book like this even needs to exist. It's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but it was my cup of tea and I sipped it right up. I will say, if you're wanting to pick this book up and read it, just check the trigger warnings before going into it, because again, it does deal with a lot of hard things. What was your first DNF of the year? My first DNF of the year was 1,000 Steps into the Night. This is one of those situations where like the description sounded so good, the concept sounded amazing, but then I got into it and I was like freaking bored. I was like, nothing is happening. We are taking so long for things to progress, and I am going to check out early because I cannot deal. I cannot deal. I'm not going to force myself to deal, so we out. It's about this girl that ends up being cursed and is slowly turning into a demon, and she has to figure out a way to like break that curse and not turn into a demon. So like, that concept sounds amazing. That concept could be so good. I just don't agree with the execution in this. Like, I just felt like it was taking its sweet, sweet time for things to progress, which is not always a bad thing. Like, there are times when that can work, but I don't think that the 120, however many pages I read of this book, that anything interesting was going on, that the characters were interesting enough for me to be like, yes, I'm going to be a ride or die for you, and you are going to make up for the fact that nothing is happening. Like, no. And as somebody who really struggles to DNF books, especially when it comes to books that I have purchased, ooh, that hurts my soul, honestly, because like, I have invested money in this thing. I want to see it through to the end, but sometimes it's just not worth it. Who knows? Maybe the story takes a turn after the part that I got to, but like, I'll never know. I will never know, and that's okay. I have to accept that. It's a part of the DNF process. But it's also the part that like hurts me a lot, because I'm like, what if it gets better? What if I'm missing out? What if that could have been a 5-star read? But no, it's going into my book graveyard and I will never know. Share a new release that you've read this year and your thoughts on it. Finally, I can get back to book gushing instead of book hating. A book that I really loved that came out this year is You Should Be So Lucky. This is actually technically a sequel, but I read it before I read the first book, but I think that they're books that you can like read without having read the other books, so I think it's fine. I hope it's fine. If I'm wrong about that, let me know down below in the comments. But this takes place in the 1960s, and we are following a baseball player and a reporter. The baseball player is having like the worst luck ever. He just got transferred to this team, and it's because he was a really fantastic player, but now he's having like the worst season of his life, which is like the worst time to have the worst season of your life when you just got transferred to this new team. Then we follow this reporter who is not a sports reporter, but he is assigned to follow this baseball player and his wreck of a season. It's a gay romance and it's incredibly slow burn, which I was feasting on that. I was like, yes, the slower the better. I loved that it took them so much time to like fully get into the romancy bits. Like, they were just really getting to know each other. They were having great banter together. They were connecting. And I also just like really love their dynamic. Like, they have such an interesting dynamic in the fact that the reporter is fully out and the baseball player is not out. I don't know why I'm not saying their names. The baseball player is Eddie and the reporter is Mark. Mark is fully out and Eddie is in the closet. And so that dynamic is really interesting, and I feel like the 1960s were just such a different time, so being out during that time was a little bit rough, as you can imagine. So that situation itself was just like really interesting to follow. I also just feel like their personalities are so different. Eddie, despite the fact that like he is having like the worst season of his life when it comes to baseball, is still like a really great person and has a very positive personality. Mark, on the other hand, is a little bit more spicy, has a little bit more snark. And so those two personalities coming together is just so fun to watch. Also, another layer to the relationship is obviously Mark is tasked with kind of like keeping tabs on Eddie's season and writing about it, and he's gonna be honest in his reports, and so like that can add a layer of conflict and kind of make things tough. But overall, it's fantastic. I feel like if you're somebody that like really loves slow burn romance, I would highly recommend this one, because it takes them a long time to fully give into the romance, but like once you get there, it's so worth it because they have such a fulfilling connection by the time that you get there. So 10 out of 10 would recommend. What's a book that came out in the first half of the year that you want to read, and a book coming out in the second half of the year that you're highly anticipating? First half of 2024, I would say Mislaid and Parts Half Known. I feel like I could honestly just like bang this out in an afternoon, but like I just keep procrastinating, which is not new for me. This is the latest installment in the Wayward Children series. I've loved the series so far. There have been some like books that really hit and some that miss a little bit, but for the most part, it's been pretty consistent. So I'm super excited about this one. Even though I haven't heard like the greatest things about this one, I'm still excited, I'm still pumped, and I'm still sad about the fact that like the dinosaur on this is misleading because I wanted a full-on dinosaur book. As for the second half of the year, I honestly had to pull up a list on Goodreads to be like, what is even coming out the second half of the year? But there was a book that caught my eye. The cover alone is gorgeous, but then I read this line and I gotta have this book. Gotta have it, need to have it, must read it. It says, once upon a time, Andrew had cut out his heart and given it to this boy, and he was very sure Thomas had no idea that Andrew would do anything for him, protect him, lie for him, kill for him. I'm intrigued. Adding it to my TBR immediately. What's the genre that you've read the most from this year? I've read around 15 fantasy books this year, so I guess I'm back in my fantasy era, but I will say that like I have a hard time with some of the books on my fantasy list because I don't really associate them as fantasy, but I think I need to think of it as more of an umbrella term, because when I think of fantasy, my mind immediately goes to high fantasy. Like a lot of the books that I've read just have like a touch of magic in them, and so it's hard for me to like associate it as like a full-fledged fantasy, but it has an element of fantasy in it, so I don't know, but fantasy! Hey! What's your most read genre this year? I want to know. Do you feel like your reading tastes have changed at all this year? Do you have a new genre that you love, a new trope that you love, a new favorite theme that you love being explored in books? If so, share with the class. I truthfully feel like my reading has been kind of like all over the place this year, which really excites me. Like I feel like I'm reading from a lot of different genres. I'm not sticking to only one thing, even though my most read genre this year is apparently fantasy. One thing that I feel like has really shifted for me is that I feel like I am gravitating towards like graphic novels and comics, and it's been a second since I've really kind of had the urge to read those things, so it excites me that I am finding myself gravitating towards that. I've also been reading a lot of manga lately, which I have been desperate to get back into manga, and I finally cracked in there. I got back in, and I'm excited to continue on with some series and start even more series that I don't need to be starting. If you set bookish/content goals this year, how is that going for you? I feel like I've done a really bad job of keeping up with my main goals for this year. Some of them though, I realized they were too like pressuring. Like there was one goal where I set out to read 100 pages a day, and honestly, I just can't do that. There are some days where I will read only 20 pages. There are some days where I will read only 0 pages. There are some days where I will knock out 300 pages in a day. And I think I would just rather keep like a page goal out of my mind and just read naturally, because I feel like if you just read naturally, you're less likely to fall into a reading slump. So I also have not been keeping up with my reading journal. And another goal that I had was to post 3 videos a week, which I have done pretty consistently. I have had a few months where I messed up a little bit, but I've actually decided moving forward that I'm going to be only doing 2 videos a week, and I'm pretty much fully switching over to reading vlogs. So I'm super excited about it because it's something that I've been wanting to do for a really long time, but with my 3-video a week schedule, it just made it really hard to kind of only focus on the vlogs. So just letting you guys know that that's what to expect moving forward. There are going to be times when I do just like sit down chit-chatty vlogs, but for the most part, I want to focus in on experimental vlogs and concept vlogs. Finally, a book that you've read this year that you feel like kind of encompasses your reading year so far. This is actually really hard. I don't know that I have a book that like fully encompasses my reading year necessarily, but I have a book in mind that like encompasses the vibe, encompasses the feeling. The book in question is The Wishing Game. I feel like reading this book just reminded me why I love books, why I love storytelling, why I make videos about books, and that's because stories are so impactful, stories are so important, and it's always nice to have a book come in the mix and remind you why you love books. That's it for the mid-year book freakout tag. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, but I want to hear from you down below in the comments. What's a book that was released in 2024 that you would highly recommend I check out? I feel like I've been really bad at keeping up with new releases this year, though to be honest, I'm always bad at keeping up with new releases, which is not a bad thing, but like I would like to read some 2024 releases. So recommend me some 2024 releases down below in the comments, and hopefully I can get to some of them this year. If you like this video, be sure to go and hit that like button. If you want to see more bookish content from me, be sure to go and hit subscribe or go and hit that bell icon and you'll be notified every time I post new videos. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope your day is bright, that tomorrow is brighter. Keep reading what your heart desires, and I will see you soon with a new video. Bye. Ho, 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 ho.